During World War II, while most soldiers tried to stay invisible on the battlefield, one role made that impossible. German infantry doctrine placed a single weapon at the center of every squad, a machine gun so loud that the enemy could identify it within seconds. But that power came at a cost. The men assigned to fire it were almost always the first targets, marked by sound, muzzle flash, and the chaos they created. Over time, this turned one of Germany's greatest battlefield advantages into one of its deadliest assignments. This is the story of the MG42 gunners, and why so many of them never made it home. The MG42 was a German general-purpose machine gun introduced during World War II, designed to give infantry units overwhelming firepower at a relatively low cost. Officially called the Maschinengewehr 42, it quickly became one of the most recognizable weapons of the war, not because of how it looked, but because of how it sounded. Allied soldiers nicknamed it Hitler's buzzsaw, while Soviet troops called it the linoleum ripper, both referring to its distinctive ripping noise caused by its extremely high rate of fire. At its core, the MG42 was built for one thing: volume of fire. It could fire between 1,200 and 1,800 rounds per minute, far faster than most machine guns of the time. This rate of fire made short bursts sound like a continuous tear, creating the illusion that multiple guns were firing at once. Even when used defensively, a single MG42 could pin down entire infantry units. The weapon fired the standard 7.92 by 57 mm Mauser cartridge and was fed by belts of 50 or 250 rounds. It weighed around 25 pounds and had an effective range of over 700 meters. One of its most important features was its quick-change barrel system, which allowed trained crews to swap overheated barrels in seconds and keep firing. Unlike earlier German machine guns such as the MG34, the MG42 was designed for mass production. It used stamped and welded parts instead of precision machining, significantly reducing production time. This allowed Germany to field far more machine guns across its units. The MG42 was not perfect. It consumed ammunition rapidly, overheated quickly, and offered no single-shot mode. But when put on a battlefield, its raw firepower, reliability in the dirt and mud, and psychological impact made it one of the most feared infantry weapons of the Second World War, and one that changed how the German army fought. Operating the MG42 was far from a simple task. It demanded teamwork, focus, and nerves of steel to withstand constant danger. At the heart of every machine gun team were three men: the gunner, the assistant, and the ammo carrier. The gunner carried the MG42, loaded with a 50-round drum and a sidearm, ready to let out a torrent of bullets at any approaching enemy. The assistant gunner was his lifeline, feeding belts of ammo, clearing jams, and swapping barrels every 250 rounds to stop the weapon from overheating. The ammo carrier trudged behind with heavy boxes, ensuring the gun never ran dry. Together, they carried around 1,800 rounds. Considering the war conditions, it was a brutal load that tested both strength and stamina. Surrounding them, the rest of the squad, 5 riflemen and a squad leader, acted as protectors. While the MG42 rained fire during an attack, riflemen advanced, covering the crew. In defense, they held the flanks of the position, fending off anyone who dared to get close. This support was critical because the MG42 was the battlefield's most obvious target. Snipers, mortars, and tanks all sought it out. Staying focused while under constant threat took courage few could muster. The MG42 was versatile at best. It could fire from the hip, a bipod, or a tripod. On a tripod, it became a sweeping machine, capable of mowing down anything in its path with alarming speed. Crews even rigged clever setups with strings and optics, firing from cover while still raining destruction. But the cost was high. Machine gunners often fired thousands of rounds in a single day, watching friends fall and facing waves of enemies. This obviously meant these gunners were under immense mental strain and psychological trauma. Yet their combination of skill, discipline, and seemingly heartless resolve made MG42 crews one of the deadliest forces of World War II. In simple words, they were a force that could dominate the battlefield, but one whose survival came at an incredibly steep price. Life as an MG42 gunner didn't just mean facing enemy bullets. It meant living with horrors most people couldn't imagine. On the front lines, they would charge into battle after battle, often for hours, facing well-defended positions with death hanging over them at every step. Many came out of these fights mentally shattered, some even breaking down completely, unable to process the things they had seen or been forced to do. But the battlefield was sometimes the easier part. What haunted some gunners even more were the orders that had nothing to do with enemy soldiers. In occupied territories, machine gun crews were used in security operations, a rather sadistic term for retaliations meant to crush resistance and terrify civilians. In some places, German commanders issued brutal directives. For every German soldier killed, 100 civilians would pay. For every one wounded, 50. And the MG42, with its deadly speed, was often the weapon of choice to make the most horrifying impression. Imagine the toll on a soldier. Fighting an enemy who is also trying to kill you, as terrifying as it is, at least feels like combat. But being ordered to fire on innocent people gathered from the streets with no connection to the war was something else entirely. In some cases, gunners spent entire days executing these horrific orders, sometimes against thousands of civilians. They came back from those days changed forever, scarred mentally and emotionally, never able to shake the memories or reconcile the actions they had been forced to take. For MG42 crews, survival wasn't just about dodging bullets. It was about surviving the weight of what they saw, what they did, and the unbearable knowledge that their skill and precision were used in ways that would haunt them for the rest of their lives. Being mentally traumatized for their actions was not the only price MG42 gunners paid. On D-Day, their skills and weapons made them some of the most feared men on the battlefield, but also some of the most hunted. From the moment dawn broke over Omaha Beach, the men behind the MG42s were caught in a nightmare that few could survive. But before looking through the horrors this day brought upon the crews, let's understand what this day was. On June 6, 1944, the Allied forces of the Nazi-occupied France united under an operation codenamed Operation Overlord, the operation that will soon become the largest amphibious assault in military history. It combined land, air, and sea forces, with nearly 133,000 troops from the United States, Britain, Canada, and other Allied nations landing across 5 beaches: Utah, Omaha, Gold, Juneau, and Sword, and was supported by over 7,000 ships and landing craft manned by 195,000 naval personnel. Facing them were heavy German defenses. For months, these gunners had trained, fought, and survived across Europe. Some were veterans of North Africa or the Eastern Front, hardened by previous campaigns. Others were young replacements, barely out of training, thrown into fortified bunkers that would become their tombs or proving grounds. Their orders were simple: mow down the enemy and hold the line. But nothing could have prepared them for the chaos that was coming their way. Among them was Heinrich Heinz Severloh, a soldier in the German 352nd Infantry Division, stationed in Widerstandsnest 62, which, by the way, was the largest strongpoint defending the eastern sectors of Omaha Beach. Severloh manned an MG42 on D-Day, firing relentlessly on the incoming Allied troops. According to his memoir, he fired over 13,500 rounds that day, claiming to have inflicted more than 1,000 casualties, possibly 2,000. Historians debate the plausibility of these numbers, especially given the total Allied losses on Omaha Beach. Severlow's firing position overlooked the first wave of Higgins boats. From early morning until mid-afternoon, he operated the MG42 with assistance from a sergeant supplying ammunition. He switched between the machine gun and 2 carabiner rifles, sustaining fire for hours. The weight of the rounds he fired was over 400 kilograms of ammunition, and this not only proves how dangerous the weapon was, but also the extent of damage these gunners were willing to endure. Witnessing the chaos they had wrought, Severlow felt sickened and horrified by the human cost, even as he fulfilled his orders. The survivors of WN62, including Severlow, faced a different kind of threat after the battle. Retreating under fire to the nearby village of Colleville-sur-Mer, they surrendered the next day, knowing that their deadly skill had painted a target on their backs. Some officers were killed during the withdrawal, others became prisoners of war, transported thousands of miles from Normandy, where the actual horror began, or so they thought. Not all MG42 gunners died on Normandy's beaches. Some, like Paul Goltz, survived the chaos only to face weeks and years of captivity. Born in Pomerania near the Baltic Sea in 1925, Paul was just 17 when he joined the Wehrmacht in 1943. By June 6, 1944, he was stationed on France's Normandy coast, tasked with watching the skies for enemy planes. That morning, he saw flares and parachutists flooding the fields and knew the invasion had begun. Hungry, tired, and facing an overwhelming force, Paul moved toward his unit, hoping to find some food and a place to fight. Assigned to a machine gun team in Grenadier Regiment 1057, Paul marched through pastures and hedges, seeing Allied troops land on the beaches and paratroopers scattered across the fields. He even captured a trembling American soldier, offering him water before bringing him to a holding area. But the following days brought relentless combat and retreats. By June 9th, after fierce fighting at the Lafayette Causeway, Paul and his comrades were surrounded by American troops. An American tank stopped at their hiding spot, and a soldier shouted, "Come on, boys, hands up." Though his heart raced, Paul realized surrender might be his only chance to survive. The Allies treated him humanely. He was searched, marched to Utah Beach, and saw the massive scale of the invasion up close. Thousands of ships, landing craft, and barrage balloons stretching across the horizon. For the first time in days, he ate a proper meal of sausage, mashed potatoes, bread, and coffee. From there, he was sent to a camp in Scotland, then across the Atlantic to Camp Patrick Henry in Virginia, and finally to a POW camp in Virginia, where he spent the rest of the war. Life in captivity was strict but fair. Prisoners served the Americans their meals, but also ate the same food, had clean beds, and could write letters home. Paul even had small comforts, like Coca-Cola in the canteen, and listening to radio shows. He remained a prisoner until May 1946, when the United States released the POWs. Afterward, he returned to Germany, discovering Poland had annexed his home region. He lived with relatives in Hamburg and the Rhineland, rebuilding his life after the war's chaos. Paul's story shows the other side of D-Day. Surrender did not always mean death, but it brought months or years of uncertainty, discipline, and waiting. Even after freedom, he faced a changed homeland and the long journey of returning to everyday life, carrying memories of fear, survival, and the weight of what he had witnessed on the battlefield. Few soldiers faced a battlefield like the MG42 gunners. For the 30% who survived, life never returned to normal. They carried the weight of every life they had taken, haunted by the chaos and fear of battle. Survival came at a price no medal could repay. If you want to uncover the hidden stories of soldiers, see how war shaped them, and understand the human cost behind history, subscribe now. And join us for more in-depth accounts from the front lines.